Hello, my name's Nick Watts. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video about debate today. Today we'll be discussing a very volatile political issue in the war on terror, and we will be discussing whether or not Korea should increase its support or abandon its role in fighting the global war on terrorism. The war on terror has been a very controversial issue. Since September 11th, many policymakers have argued that terrorism is the greatest threat posed to Western societies. As such, the United States has taken the lead in fighting terrorism in the Middle East and has even fought multiple wars and is currently fighting against terrorist groups in places like Afghanistan and Pakistan. While government officials are quick to point out that there has not been a major terrorist attack since September 11th, many have argued that the damage done by United States efforts in the Middle East has done more harm than good, and even risks convincing some individuals to become more radical in their hatred for Western regimes, which could ultimately make joining some known terrorist groups such as the Taliban or Al-Qaeda a better option for individuals who are undecided. David begins this debate by giving his first constructive speech and argues that this is an important issue for Korea to be concerned with. During 2011, there was a wave of revolutions in the Middle East that has been since called the Arab Spring. During this wave of revolutions, Korea aided the Bahraini regime that was already in control of Bahrain, the country in the Middle East. David is arguing that this support only made the situation in Bahrain and the violence between the radicals and revolutionaries who sought to overturn the Al-Khalifa regime. It made the fighting worse and even more violent. Thus, just like other policymakers who have criticized the United States' role in the Middle East, David is criticizing the support that Korea gave to the war on terrorism in the Middle East recently. His opponent in this debate is Sarah, and Sarah is arguing that Korea should increase its support of the war on terrorism in the Middle East because of the empirical success. Sarah is making the argument that was noted before, that the war on terrorism is simply an effective way of stopping terrorists. Sarah is arguing that policies such as the United States policies of drone strikes, which is the use of unmanned air vehicles to drop bombs and commit targeted killing on known terrorist organizations and individuals, has generally been successful, even if it has had some minor consequences. David begins his rebuttal by continuing his train of argument that says that any support from outside forces in conflicts such as the civil war that's occurring in Syria right now can only make the situation worse. That ultimately it will be up to these countries to decide the fate of their nation for themselves. David argues that whenever the United States and Korea supports the regimes that are being criticized, that it risks radicalizing the opposition. That instead of being successful at stopping Al-Qaeda, that drone strikes, for example, through the unfortunate deaths of innocent civilians that are also killed whenever a drone fires on a known terrorist, risk making arguments from terrorist organizations such as the Al-Qaeda even more persuasive to individuals. Sarah, however, argues that Korea must continue to support the war on terrorism. Sarah is making the argument that the Middle East is a very unstable place today, and that without the help of nations such as Korea and the United States, that the fighting there will simply never stop. Sarah was ultimately the winner of this debate. If you noticed, in Sarah's final rebuttal speech, she argued that there are different ways in which Korea could support the war on terrorism that did not rely on simply shooting people or doing violent acts, such as helping the United States to screen for chemical and biological weapons, which both sides of the debate should be able to agree on that they are bad things. This distinction is important because David never responded to this claim and assumed that any Korean support to the war on terrorism in the Middle East would be just like how the United States is currently fighting the war on terrorism, with bombs and missiles. Thanks for watching. Bye.